we are going to, so from the last years, I think EIT has moved a little bit further to the practical use, and then initially we were interested in PEEP titration, but then I think the field evolved a lot. I have some conflicts here because I participate in the development of an EIT device in Brazil. So first, a general principle: the slice we measure with EIT is approximately this size. So it's a thick slice, about 10 centimeters. Nowadays, the systems evolved, and then if you compare the accuracy of measuring gas content with the best, most precise technology available today, which is CT, and you compare with the gas volume, the changes in gas volume that you get with EIT, it's really nice. And especially in very different scenarios, we went from full collapse of the lung to total lung capacity, and this has been very reproducible. Distribution of ventilation also, there are many studies showing that the errors are below 5%. So if you compare with CT, and remember, CT is capable of measuring 1 ml of tidal volume in a certain region of the lung. PEEP titration, so what is new about this with EIT? First of all, it's interesting to see that both patients here, they are at the same PEEP level, 0. But the difference here is that I did a very fast deflation. So I have lots of air trapping here. So CT takes some time, sorry, just go back. CT takes some time to show a really atelectative lung zone because you need the reabsorption of nitrogen here. But this zone is already excluded from ventilation. And when you're titrating PEEP by EIT, you are measuring the regions disconnected from central airways, because this is the principle of EIT. So, which means that these zones are already excluded from ventilation. And then if I wait just 1 minute, I will see total lung collapse, like this. But why I'm saying this? Because EIT measured this disconnection, it's really interesting that you can do a very fast PEEP titration, and even if you don't have an equilibrium of blood gases or equilibrium of CT collapse, you have already your estimation of PEEP. So instead of doing the old-fashioned maneuvers in 40 minutes, we are doing in 5 minutes. And then we can have very reliable results compared with the traditional maneuvers taking a long time. So less than 1 centimeter of water in estimation of ideal PEEP. And using this technology, just in 1 to 5 minutes, you can estimate your ideal PEEP. So for instance, we did this validation study in patients in abdominal surgery. If you do the traditional approach in our hospital, which is use a PEEP of 5, we have lots of atelectasis after extubation. And then if we do a quick titration intraoperatively, you can avoid a lot of collapse, and then these patients also have a decrease in driving pressure of at least 5 centimeters of water. Interestingly, this optimization of PEEP produces a very interesting relationship. This is body mass index, this is optimum PEEP. The nice thing is that in some physiological studies, we have shown that this optimum PEEP coincided very precisely with 0 to 2 transpulmonary pressure. So we are really optimizing a certain PEEP that is enough to keep the lung open, but not overdistending a centimeter of water above FRC. And the interesting thing is that obese patients, they need more PEEP, but the spreading is still very large, so which means that we still need individualization. You can see that some patients with a body mass index of 27, some patients need 7 of PEEP, but some patients needed 16. Using this approach, you can reduce driving pressures intra and post-operatively by 7 centimeters of water, depending on the patient. The more obese the patient, the higher the benefit. In these patients with 40 of body mass index, optimizing PEEP promotes 8 centimeters of water reduction in driving pressure. This is the same number that you get reducing tidal volume from 12 to 6 mL per kilogram. So it's a lot. Overdistension. In many patients with swine flu, we have shown that these patients are very poorly recruitable, and then you have lots of overdistension in EIT. And then this changed a lot our attitude in the last years, because we realized that these patients, they need much less PEEP than the low PEEP FiO2 table of the heart stent. Prone positioning, what we have learned, that obviously collapse in prone is upside down. In fact, we should do something like this. And like John Marini was telling us today, he was also surprised that many patients in prone, they still have a lot of collapse. They have the same tendency to collapse the lung. So it doesn't mean that turning your patient prone that you need less PEEP. And this is very self-evident using EIT. Nicely, hyperdistension goes to the dorsal zones. Also, dynamically, we have seen that we can identify areas of Pendeluft, shown here in white. What is this? It's regions suffering local and regional overdistension because of this strong diaphragmatic activation. And we can see here that we can identify that while the average lung is receiving 7 mL per kilogram, equivalent to 7, some regions of the lung shown in white, they are receiving equivalent to 10, or sometimes, like in this patient, double the tidal volume, triple the tidal volume of the rest of the lung. So, and this has been shown to cause inflammation in many experimental studies. Perfusion. We have done lots of studies making an infusion of saline. And then this is some studies that we did using a Swan-Ganz as a model of obstruction of the vessel. So this is a bilateral perfusion in the CT, bilateral perfusion in EIT, occlusion of the Swan-Ganz to the left lung, to the right lung. So let's see now real cases in patients. This is a patient in our ICU, big mediastinal mass. So there was a big suspicion that this mass was blocking the main pulmonary artery. We did a perfusion study, and we had a very good bilateral perfusion. So, and when we plotted this map on top of the ventilation map, you can see that then we could identify why this patient was so hypoxemic. This is why the patient entered the ICU. The suspicion was a pulmonary emboli, but then we saw very good bilateral perfusion. So what was going on was a defect of ventilation causing a big shunt. So it changed completely the approach to this patient. Another interesting case is like this. So the cardiac phase is in blue, and then let me go back this 1 second. You see when the saline goes to the heart in blue, and then the left lung, and then you don't see any signal in the bottom part of the right lung. Look at this. Just 13% of perfusion is going to the right lung. This patient had a big emboli. And then, but it was a chronic patient with pulmonary hypertension. And then we did a very careful examination by CT. And then what happened is that we decided to remove thrombi during an endarterectomy. After the endarterectomy, we had another perfusion map just after the surgery, and you can see that from 30% we got 41%. And this avoided lots of contrast to this patient, and we were sure that the procedure was successful. Instead of infusing saline, you sometimes can just collect information synchronized with ECG. Technology is evolving now. Some devices, they have 100 images per second synchronized with the ECG. And if this happens, you can track some changes that are happening in the heart area or in the lung area, and they are in opposition of phase because the blood is going from the heart and increasing impedance to the lung, decreasing impedance. And by tracking separately these two signals, we have shown that you can estimate very nicely the stroke volume. So you can have an online estimation of your stroke volume. And this is now almost shown in real time in some devices. Some new developments, and this is my last point. We are taking information from something like 600 CTs, making a data bank, and then having this statistical information to help you to reconstruct the image. And by doing this procedure, you can see that you have a much more interesting image. It's not just like a bubble or a toy. You have a really anatomical information. And for instance, in this particular animal, we could see that the match between CT and EIT was really remarkable just because of this anatomical information. What else? This anatomical information is leveraging us, the technology, a little bit further. Because now, a very smart engineer in the Polytechnic Institute had the idea of putting the electrodes in zigzag, like this. When you put the electrodes in zigzag, something very beautiful happened. Because suddenly we don't have only a slice, we have the reconstruction of the whole volume of the lung. Look at this. This is just a simulation. I have a rod here, and then the influence of this rod in these electrodes is completely different if the rod is in this other position. Which means that then I can track the movement along the cranial-caudal axis of this rod. For instance, look at this. I'm going to move up. You see? So we can see something moving from the caudal lung to the upper lung. It's not only a slice. Which means that then if you have a belt like this, you can reconstruct different slices of the lung and you have images of the whole lung. So I'm just showing an example in babies. So unfortunately the image is very slow here. But this is the upper slice of the lung. We can see here that I don't see too much the heart. Now a little bit lower slice, more caudal slice, we see the heart. And the lung has a different shape. Unfortunately we cannot see here because the computer is slow. And also a caudal one, where you see that only the dorsal parts of the lung because of the shape of the diaphragm. So you can really have a 3D, you can see here that you have only the dorsal lung moving. So I think this is the future. We can see upper lung, so apex to the very caudal one with just one single belt. And then we can much more estimate cardiac output and the changes and the blockage of ventilation in specific areas of the lung. This is a nice example. This is the last one. You can see that the heart here is at the upper level, and in the caudal part of the lung we see the movement of blood. This is an expiratory pause. The movement of blood is in opposition of phase to the heart area in the two upper slices. So this is a teamwork doing in a university base, and now we are having a good relationship with startup companies, and then we are trying to move ahead with this technology. Thank you very much.